Brock Boeser's representative agent talks to Rutherford. They make a mutual decision that there's going to be a move down in the future. I don't know what kind of future, but then Dhaliwal comes forward, Friedman comes forward. Yes, there's been some kind of agreement where Boeser, no, he hasn't requested a trade, so that's not his own decision. But it's kind of like the guy struggled, was about to be a healthy scratch down to the third line. But boom, tonight, as we're recording this podcast, Boeser back with Pettersson. So maybe everything I'm about to say is so irrelevant because maybe Boeser, as I was saying to you off air, Lucas, maybe he ends up going off with Pettersson again. But I still think there's a chance that 6.65, 2 more years after this year, do they try to move it for the cap space? But then they talk about a max of a Bjorkstrand kind of return, which is a 3rd and 4th. Canucks fans, are you really taking a 3rd round pick for Brock Boeser straight up? Lucas, man, what a disaster. The Canucks it just keeps on going. Storyline after storyline after storyline. And then I'm seeing even Friedman throw out Thatcher Demko's name in a trade conference. Like, what do you think of this whole situation, man?
The Boeser one, we'll start there. I think that them playing him with Pettersson tonight is surely to try to extract value. I don't even think anymore that it's, just the best lineup decision. I think that they want Boeser to damn right go out there and score 2 goals to pump up that value before they move him, right? So that's where I think that one's at. I think his time has come and gone. I really do think he's going to get moved. I think that Brock Boeser has had so many different storylines and so many different seasons where there's been talked about a move from out of Vancouver.
It's not the first time we've talked about it.
So I think this is definitely the last time we'll be talking about it. Maybe not on the show because maybe this might take a few weeks.
Yeah.
But I do think he's going to get moved, John. I think Vancouver has finally come to grips with, you know what? We're too inconsistent right now. We don't like the way this core has been structured. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. There's good players, but they're not working together. And I think we're really going to see the tear down and sort of a retool on the fly. I don't know if it's going to be straight to the bottoms of a rebuild, especially with the way you just signed JT Miller. But I think there's going to be a retool on the fly. And so I think Brock Boeser is no longer going to be a Canuck in a handful of weeks here.
Well, and I also look at it as like what we just talked about in the last pod is like this Canucks situation also becomes more difficult because it's like if they're riding the line of a playoff spot, exactly how they were last year, it's like, how can you make those kind of moves? Mm-hmm. So I think that's why it's like that you look at the Boeser situation because it's like you're not going to make those kind of like Demko, Horvat like moves unless you're getting like this big time. The Horvat one's different. I shouldn't because we've talked about it. And it's like he's a pending UFA. So they might just have to trade him. But like in the scenario of core guys, they're not really trying to trade those core guys. More specifically, like a Pettersson or Hughes. They're just not going to trade those guys. But then a Demko one, I don't think that's happening in season. And then the Horvat one's just off default if they have to move him because he just won't resign. And the JT Miller one's a whole different conversation. But that's where Boeser comes in.
John, maybe a lot of this too stems from, like I know Elliot Friedman was talking about it earlier today, but I think a lot of it might stem from this Demko injury. Maybe this was just the final nail in the coffin. Demko gets hurt and they go, you know what? This just isn't our year. Let's peel it back and see what we can get for some of our players. And maybe the Demko injury, we don't wish anyone to be hurt, but maybe the Demko injury is a chance for them, an opportunity for Vancouver to kind of reevaluate and maybe tank for Bedard. I mean, it very well
what a
might
shift
go
that would be. Right? I mean, I would look like the dummy because I put faith back into Vancouver last week saying, hey, they're going to squeak in.
Unless Spencer Martin just doesn't let them lose, right?
He's
been good this year.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I mean, the fact that these kind of rumors are spilling out from, Dhaliwal and Friedman are leading the charge on this, but it's like when I start hearing things like tip of the iceberg, like just the beginning, and then we're hearing comparisons of like the Bjorkstrand return of the 3rd and 4th, them not even getting that on a straight out deal where it's like, okay, it is 6.65, 2 more years. So it's in a tough cap world. Like that's a lot to take on. Mm-hmm. I do want to throw out a couple scenarios here, but when I look at this, it's like, do we not know who this Brock Boeser guy is? Like, yeah, he's struggling and he looks lazy defensively, but like pulling it up here, it's like, this guy's not like, in terms of his potential of production every year, he's not a bum. This guy's scored almost 30 goals one season. He scored over 20 4 times, over 25 twice. And he almost put up a point per game twice in a season. So not full seasons, but 49 points in 56 games, 45 points in 50 something games as well. Like, I just look at this guy, like, someone's got to take a flyer on this guy. The same way Seattle took Bjorkstrand. That was for a different scenario because Columbus just strictly needed the cap space. This is more of like an internal problem and a player struggling problem. I also did, Dollywall put this out there. The clip is on Twitter right now, that Calgary has already kicked tires on Brock Boeser. So that is hilarious. I think the fact that the Flames and Canucks have made trades before and they're in division, but okay, we're making it a Leaf thing again, Lucas here. If you're Kyle Dubas, do you not call Vancouver and go, hey, we got the LTIR flexibility here, but not only that, you guys are willing to take a contract or two that's expiring this summer. Hey, Mr. Kerfoot. Hey, Mr. Engbum. See you later. Let's bring in Brock Boeser, throw him on a line with fellow American Austin Matthews. Boom.
Yeah, I think absolutely. If you're Kyle Dubas, you got to call. We've been talking about the Leafs needing a scoring winger. And if Vancouver's going to give him away for pennies on the dollar, you got to jump in there. Especially when you have Kerfoot with one goal, like we've talked about for, it feels like weeks. We've been saying he has one goal because we have. This is an opportunity for the Leafs to really address something months and months before the deadline. Like they can get ahead on this.
No, seriously, right now, Lucas, I'm not even joking.
Yeah.
If the trade, so if Dubas is guaranteed that he knows Muzzin's out for the year and he knows he has that LTIR flexibility, I am like doing it tomorrow, like Kerfoot and a couple mid-round picks for Boeser. Like if that's the deal, if third and fourth Kerfoot, all right, maybe I seem dumb, but I'm just saying, like, you're talking about a guy that can score 20 to 25 goals on a year. And again, it's pricey. It's 6.65 per year, but seriously, man, we're talking about the Toronto offense. Like, it's got to be a scenario where you're taking a shot here. You're absolutely taking a shot. And Dubas took the risk with Matt Murray, and he got heavily criticized. And I don't think Vancouver's retaining any cap here. But what I am saying is, like, if you're able to send a contract back, knowing you have the LTIR flexibility for the rest of the year, like, this is one of the teams where I'm saying the same way we said Colorado going for that center, trying to buy low on a center. And I'm about to bring up a name in a second here, but Boeser is the scoring winger that I think if you're the Leafs, you should try to buy low on big time. I think whatever contending team, if it is a contending team, gets it on Boeser, because I was also thinking of other scenarios where like Arizona or Buffalo, as like, if you want to look on the reverse side of things for Boeser, is like, I'm pretty sure Boeser was former teammates with Nick Schmaltz. He was also former teammates with Tyson Jost. So Jost is in Buffalo right now. Those two teams would have the flexibility to take on a Boeser contract, right? So I think it could be on the flip side, the same way Seattle, not being a contender at the time, went for Bjorkstrand. In your eyes, do you see it going on the side of a team with the cap flexibility that's not a contender, just taking on Boeser for a change of scenery? Or do you think it's the contender type of deal, like a Leafs, that goes for it? Because then it becomes a little tougher. But Toronto has the different type of scenario because of obviously the injuries.
I think realistically, I think it's going to be the team, not the contending team, the other side of things, because I think a team like Buffalo has the more space and time on their side to make a deal like that.
Yeah.
I think the Leafs, now that I'm, thinking about it retrospectively, if the Leafs were to make this deal, there is still 2 years left on the contract, and that goes for all other contending teams that would come in on this. There's still 2 additional years, and at 6.65, depending on how your other players are locked up, maybe you don't want to have that on the books when in the Leaf scenarios, a Matthews comes, out of contract.
That's
Nylander,
the one thing I'd say.
That's the one thing that's pushing me away from that now. The Buffalo fit seems like a nice one. I knew Montreal was floated out there, but important to know, Brock Boeser doesn't have a no trade clause as well. So Vancouver's going to trade him wherever they want. His no trade clause starts in July 1st, 2024. So it's a long ways out. I mean, it's such a tough deal because at his best, like you said, John, he's a 25 goal in the bank, 60 plus point scorer. And he's a scoring power play winger who can drive play as well at even strength. Like, I think he's a valuable player. It's just, can a team like the Leafs, who have allocated so much up front, do they see this working in their plans? I don't know.
The only thing I'd say on on an opposite argument on that is like the Leafs do have Brody's contract, Muzzin's contract, and Murray's contract off the books leading into that Matthews contract. So they'll have a lot more flexibility. by that year. But yeah, you're right.
Also,
I think outside of the Yarncrow contract, Dubas has
Yeah.
shown he really doesn't want to commit to anything past the 2-year threshold, right?
Also, I feel like Vancouver, as much as Kerfoot can be a valuable piece if he gets his game sorted, and Hall can be a bottom pair defenseman. For Vancouver, doesn't make sense because both those guys have a year left. So is this a situation where they take them on and maybe flip them again? Possibly, but I think Vancouver's going to want, they can't really ask for a ton just based on who can take on this contract, but Vancouver's going to want something they can hold on to for past this season, right? Or a draft pick of some value that I would think has to be higher than a third, like, right? A third and a fourth, like that Bjorkstrand trade was just such a one-off. I can't see something like that going down.
Well, I mean, was it a one-off? I mean, look at the Pacioretty trade. I mean, again, he ended up getting hurt, but at the time he wasn't hurt. So that's the only thing I think of is like, we saw a couple one-offs maybe, but it could become a trend, Lucas, if the scenario of like cap doesn't go up to where it's expected. And two, if these contending teams really just, if that's kind of the standard, if all of these like rental team or like selling teams versus buying teams just can't get on the same page for deals, then that's a standard that just might stick. Like these teams might just be like, we don't care. Like, we know you need the space. We'll take that player, but we're not going to give you assets for it. I mean, that's exactly what happened with Carolina. They were like, we could tell you're in a bind. Like, we'll take Pacioretty, but we're not giving you assets. Same thing happened with Bjorkstrand. Like everyone and their mother knew that Columbus was in a tough spot, and Seattle goes, we'll give you 2 picks. That's generous. You give us Bjorkstrand and you can have your cap space.
And Boeser and Pacioretty actually have a little bit of a link too, because they are both goal scoring wingers who seem to be on the IR quite a bit in that regard. And so, yeah, I mean, you make a compelling case there. I think that's certainly a good example to bring up when it comes to discussing like a Brock Boeser
I talked
trade.
about the Leafs. If I'm Zona or Buffalo, I'm easily saucing a third and even maybe a lower pick too to get a Brock Boeser, because I'm looking at Arizona. Like I said, the Nick Schmaltz connection for me would be cool. I think a Keller Schmaltz Boeser line could be fun. And Buffalo, as I said, I think if you're the Sabres, you're trying to build around a somewhat younger core. Boeser, like, we still forget he's 25. Like, he's still only 25. I think Boeser could be a good fit in Buffalo. So those would be my 2 teams. If you had a team right now for Boeser, that not one that we just talked about, do you have? I mean, the one that everyone wants to go to is Minnesota because that's his hometown team.
Yeah.
But Friedman kind of squashed that because it's like they're not looking for offensive wingers. They're not looking for that kind of fit. And they're obviously money tight with the Parise and Suter stuff.
I mean, could the Devils? I don't have their cap in front of me. But
I actually,
Devils,
I was thinking about that. That one could be interesting. That one definitely could be interesting, and even more so because I feel like we've had Severson tied to Vancouver. They maybe need a red shot guy. Like I like that. I honestly, I like.
And
that.
with the Devils, I mean, with this being their first year, really looking good, maybe the organization elects to say, you know what? Let's reward the players and let's try to go for it this year, right?
And we've talked about it too with the Devils is like, yeah, if they're going for it, they're kind of in the early stages of like, again, making it a Toronto thing. Like when Toronto was early on, they weren't making those big deals. They traded a 2nd-round pick for Brian Boyle, right? So like this could be the kind of move for the Devils, like sauce a 3rd-round pick, send maybe one of those contracts, bring in a Brock Boeser. That's your addition for the playoffs. Leave it as is.
Yeah,
right?
it's like a let's reward the team. Let's see what we can really do this year and push for something. But it's not necessarily expected this year, right? So yeah, I like that. I like
and
that.
Jack Hughes saucing a Boeser on the power play. I think that would get him going a bit.
Oh yeah, man.